Right, ready to dive deep into some pretty heady stuff.
Sounds fun.
Today, we're going to be exploring the Law of One
Hmm.
and Hinduism.
Okay.
And you've actually given me some excerpts from the Law of One,
Right?
some scholarly articles on Hinduism, and even some sociological analyses. So
Cool.
we've got a lot to unpack here. I have a feeling this might be one of those mind-blown episodes.
I think you might be right about that. It's really striking how these two systems, even though they come from totally different places,
Yeah.
both look at those basic questions, about why are we here? Who are we? Where are we going?
Yeah. It's like they're giving us different maps
Yeah.
to the same place,
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah.
So for our listener who might not know much about one or both of these, let's do a super quick overview.
Okay.
So the Law of One, it's all about wisdom
Wow.
channeled from this entity called Ra.
Okay.
Ra kind of presents these teachings as cosmic law, emphasizing things like spiritual evolution, the connection of everything, and the power of choice.
And Hinduism, wow, where do we even start with Hinduism? It's this incredible, rich tradition with
Yes.
beliefs and practices,
Yeah.
and it's evolved over thousands of years.
Thousands.
We're talking ancient scriptures,
Yeah.
intricate mythologies, all sorts of deities, a whole range of spiritual paths.
Right.
But for our purposes today,
Yeah.
we're going to zero in on a few core concepts
Okay.
like dharma, karma, reincarnation, and the pursuit of liberation, which, all kind of intertwine with these ideas.
So basically, we're looking for those points of connection,
Yes.
those moments where these two systems seem to be saying similar truths,
Yeah,
and then, of course, where they're different.
right.
And most importantly, how these ancient ideas can be applied to our lives today.
Totally agree. Let's jump in.
Right.
A good place to start might be how they each understand reality. The Law of One puts forth this radical idea that all is one. What it's saying is there's just this one infinite creator experiencing itself through every little spark of consciousness. So we and everything else in existence are all part of this big unified field of awareness.
Well, we're already getting deep here.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because Hinduism also has this idea of ultimate reality.
Right.
They call it Brahman.
Yes.
And it's often described as this formless, infinite, all-encompassing source of everything.
And within that ultimate reality, there's this thing called Atman,
Okay.
the individual soul or self.
Okay.
And it's seen as like a reflection, a drop from the ocean of Brahman.
Hmm.
So both systems seem to be pointing to this, basic connection, this idea that separation is just an illusion.
Yeah, and that's a pretty wild thought when you stop and think about it.
Yeah.
It really challenges how we usually see ourselves as separate
Yeah.
people. But then, if we are all connected, if we're all just part of this cosmic play,
Right.
what does that mean for our individual journey?
Right.
Does that mean we don't have free will?
That's where things get even more interesting. The Law of One actually emphasizes free will
That-
as the main driver behind our evolution. And this, surprisingly, lines up pretty well with the Hindu concept of karma, which I think gets misunderstood a lot these days.
I think a lot of people think of karma as just some cosmic punishment and reward system.
Yeah.
But it's got to be more than that.
Oh, definitely. At its core, karma is about action and consequence. It says that our choices, everything we think, everything we intend, they all create ripples that shape our experiences,
Okay.
not just in this life, but in future ones too.
Oh, wow.
And this might seem like a preset path, but it's really about how our will interacts with those universal laws that, govern everything.
So it's less about fate and more about the responsibility we have for shaping our own reality.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like we're always weaving this tapestry of
Right.
our lives one thread at a time with each choice we make. And both the Law of One and Hinduism seem to be saying that we're not just watching this happen, we're part of it, creating it with the universe. So that brings us to the question of how do we actually, travel this path?
Right.
If we're all evolving,
Yeah.
always making choices that
Yeah.
are shaping our experience, what's the path actually look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, both of these systems talk about spiritual growth.
Right. Right.
But do they give us anything concrete about, how to actually evolve?
Well, it's interesting. They actually both do, each in their own way. The Law of One gets pretty specific.
Okay.
It lays out these two main paths of spiritual evolution.
Okay.
Service to others and service to self.
So service to others, I think most people would say that's being on the right path.
Yeah.
But service to self, that sounds kind of counterintuitive. Isn't that just being selfish?
That's where it gets tricky and honestly pretty fascinating. The law of one doesn't say service to self is necessarily bad or unethical.
Okay.
What it suggests is that both paths, if you follow them all the way, can actually lead to higher levels of consciousness. But it seems like those paths really diverge when it comes to, like,
Yeah.
motivation and how they affect others.
So service to others, I mean, that's pretty straightforward, right? You're putting others first.
Yeah.
But service to self, how does that even work?
It's about putting your own growth and your own well-being above everything else.
Hmm.
And yeah, on the surface, that might sound selfish, but the law of one says that, like, a truly evolved service to self being
Hmm.
would eventually understand that their well-being is tied to everyone else's.
Okay.
But the way there can involve, let's just say, some not so altruistic actions.
That's pretty complex. So it's not just good versus evil.
Right.
It's about the intention behind it all, the goal you're aiming for.
Exactly. And Hinduism has its own way of looking at spiritual growth. Instead of two paths, it offers all these yogic paths, each focusing on different aspects of practice.
Okay.
So you've got karma yoga, which is about selfless action, bhakti yoga, the path of devotion, jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, and so on.
So Hinduism's kind of giving us more options, more tools to reach that ultimate goal of liberation,
Yes.
which, if I'm getting this right, is about breaking free from this cycle of birth, death, and rebirth.
Exactly. Liberation, or moksha, it's like the ultimate goal for a lot of Hindu traditions.
Right.
It's about going beyond the limits of the material world and realizing that we're actually divine beings.
Okay, that makes sense. Both systems are talking about this journey of evolution, this process of, growing and refining ourselves.
Yeah.
But do they offer any insights into, like, the why of it all?
Right.
What's the point? What are we actually striving for?
That's a deep question.
It is.
And both systems try to answer it in their own ways. The law of one talks about the harvest of souls.
Okay.
It says that as we evolve through these different levels of consciousness, we're ultimately moving towards becoming one with the Creator. Think of it as like a huge reunion, going back to where we all came from.
Wow. Okay. What about Hinduism? Does it have a similar vision of the end goal?
In a way, yeah. The details might be different, but the ultimate aim in a lot of Hindu traditions is achieving liberation.
Okay.
It's about escaping this cycle of suffering and rebirth and realizing our true nature as divine beings.
Yeah.
Basically merging back into Brahman.
So both systems are basically using different metaphors for the same idea, right? We're all on a journey back home, back to the source.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not always an easy journey, is it?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not.
There are going to be challenges, setbacks, times of doubt, despair.
Life throws you curveballs.
Right.
And sometimes it feels like they come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So how do these systems approach suffering?
Yeah.
Because let's be real, it's part of life.
It is, and both systems acknowledge that, but they also see suffering as a chance to grow and transform. The law of one, for example, talks about catalysts, which are basically challenges or experiences that help us learn and evolve.
So everything, even the hard stuff, is designed to help us move forward.
That's the idea. And Hinduism, with its focus on karma and reincarnation, also sees suffering as part of this bigger cycle of growth.
Okay.
It says that our experiences, both good and bad, are the result of our past actions, and that by learning from them, we can make better choices that lead to more harmony and ultimately liberation.
Okay, that makes sense. But why is there so much suffering?
Right.
If we're all connected, why can't we just, get along and evolve without all the pain?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is.
And to be honest, I don't think either system has a definitive answer.
Okay.
But they do give us frameworks for understanding suffering and ways to deal with it that can lead to more understanding and compassion.
So it's less about finding an easy answer and more about finding meaning in the struggle.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because both systems seem to be saying that how we interpret our experiences plays a huge role in our growth and evolution.
So it's not just about what happens to us,
Right.
but how we choose to react.
Exactly. That's where free will comes back in. We always have a choice in how we react to challenges. Do we give in to negativity, or do we see them as opportunities for learning?
It's like that saying, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Exactly. And both the law of one and Hinduism offer practices and perspectives that can help us go through suffering in a more conscious way.
Yeah.
A way that leads to transformation.
So we've been talking about how suffering can actually help us grow.
Yeah.
It sounds like both the law of one and Hinduism are saying that, the tough stuff in life,
Right.
it's not just random.
Yeah.
There's actually purpose behind it.
Yes, and that purpose seems to connect back to this idea of evolution. Both systems suggest that we're always learning and growing and refining our understanding of ourselves and the universe.
Mhm.
And sometimes those lessons come through experiences that, really push us to our limits, that force us to face our fears and our shadows.
Yeah. It's like we need those tough times
Yeah.
to really, polish those rough edges of our souls.
I like that analogy. And what's really interesting is that both systems offer specific practices to help us through those rough times. Like, the law of one puts a lot of emphasis on meditation.
Oh.
It's a way to access higher wisdom
Right?
and connect with our true selves.
By meditation, yeah. I could see how that would be helpful. Just quieting the mind,
Right.
getting into that stillness.
Yeah,
It can definitely help us see things more clearly when we're going through tough stuff.
absolutely. And of course, Hinduism has a whole bunch of practices. You've got
Yeah.
yoga, which works on the physical, mental, and spiritual levels. You've got mantra chanting, which can change our energy and connect us to specific deities or qualities. And then you have different forms of devotional practice,
Oh.
like puja, which can cultivate a sense of reverence and gratitude.
So it's like both systems are giving us a toolbox
Yeah.
for working with our inner world so we can go through the ups and downs of life
Right.
with more, grace and awareness.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just about those individual practices either. Both systems also talk about how important community and connection are in this journey of evolution. The law of one talks about the power of group harmony. How when people come together with a shared purpose to serve and grow, they can actually increase their spiritual energy and speed up their collective evolution.
That's a beautiful idea. It makes sense, I mean, we're social beings
Yeah.
meant to connect. And when we find people who are on the same page,
Yeah.
who share our values,
Yeah.
it can be so supportive and
It-
inspiring.
It is. And Hinduism has this long tradition of satsang,
Okay.
which basically means getting together with like-minded people
Yeah.
to practice and connect.
Mm.
It's about creating a supportive space to share wisdom,
Yeah.
to chant mantras, to deepen our connection to the divine.
So whether we're meditating by ourselves or gathered with others for these practices, it sounds like both systems are saying, hey, focus on that inner connection,
Yes.
that feeling of alignment with who we really are
Right.
and with something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. And that brings us to what I think is one of the most practical takeaways from all of this. Self-awareness. Both the law of one and Hinduism say we need to understand our own thoughts,
Okay.
our emotions
Yeah.
and motivations. They're basically saying that the better we know ourselves,
Yeah.
the more aware we become of our choices
Hmm.
and how those choices affect everyone around us.
So it's not just about book knowledge.
Right.
It's about developing that inner observer.
Yeah.
So we can step back and really see our own internal processes.
Right. And this is where things get even more interesting because both systems suggest that we're not just watching these thoughts and emotions passively. We actually get to choose which thoughts we focus on, which emotions we want to cultivate. The law of one talks about aligning our thoughts, words, actions with our true nature as beings of, love and light.
And Hinduism talks about dharma, which I guess you could say is living in line with our unique purpose.
Yeah.
It's about making sure our actions match our highest values and sharing our unique gifts with the world.
Exactly. And when we create that alignment within ourselves, experience this sense of purpose,
Yeah.
meaning, and fulfillment in our lives.
Yeah, it's like those moments when everything just clicks. We're doing what we love.
Yeah.
We're surrounded by people we care about.
Right.
And we feel connected to something bigger.
Yes. And those moments might not last forever, but the
Right.
more we cultivate that inner alignment, the more often they show up.
All right, we've covered a lot today. We talked about the nature of reality,
Yeah.
different paths of spiritual evolution,
Right.
the challenges and opportunities that come with suffering, the importance of practice and community,
Yeah.
and the power of being self-aware. It's been, mind-expanding, to say the least.
It really has. And even though we've only just scratched the surface of these complex systems,
Yeah,
I hope our listeners have gotten a sense of the wisdom and insights they have to offer.
me too. And if there's one thing I've learned from this deep dive, it's that both the law of one and Hinduism are basically guiding us in the same direction,
Right.
towards a deeper understanding of ourselves, our place in the universe,
Yeah.
and our potential for love, growth, and transformation.
Beautifully said. And to everyone listening, I would say keep exploring these teachings.
Yeah.
See what resonates with you, because ultimately this journey of self-discovery is a personal one.
Yeah.
It's guided by our intuition and our unique experiences.
Well, on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the Law of One and Hinduism.
Oh.
See you next time for another exploration into the mysteries of existence.